Let's have a few moments of silence and invite God to the meeting. Amen. Thank you. So, everybody got one? So let's fill the room with them. There you go. Get one. They're passing them out over there.
Where's Tony at? He needs to blow bubbles. I'm all sticky.
You were sticky before. So, page 151. Isn't that fun? Oh, that's really good. That's really good. Now and then, the serious drinker being drawn to the moment says, don't miss it all. Feel better, work better, having a better time. As ex-problem drinkers, we smile at such a sally. We know our friend is like a boat whistling in the dark to keep up his spirits. He fools himself. Inwardly, he would give anything to take a half a dozen drinks and get away with them. I want to talk about that. I don't have any interest at all in being a social drinker. I don't think a glass of wine is going to make the steak taste any better. I have no interest in having a drink with the boys on the way home from work, or a beer while I mow the grass or watch the ball game. A half a dozen, the way I pour, no consequences, we could talk. All right, a friend of mine says if I could be a social drinker, I'd start it early in the day and do it all day long. That's my thinking on it exactly. So I don't need to fool myself, Hidwer. People like me die from trying to be social drinkers. It's a killer. Half a dozen, so there's the truth. And then it says, he will presently try the old game again. Tell us why, for he isn't happy about his sobriety. So if I'm going to get sober and stay sober, the book says I'm going to have to find a way to be happy and sober at the same time, and I didn't know it could be done. My two greatest fears when I came to recovery are one, I'm going to hang out with dull people, and two, I'm never going to have any more fun. Boy, was I wrong about all of that. And so that's why I passed out the bubbles. I carry them with me all the time. One of the reasons I wear the vest is I carry 4 or 5 of those all the time. And I just give them to people. I fly a lot on weekends, and you go through an airport, you'll see some unhappy children. You want to have some fun? Get about this far away and start blowing bubbles and get the kids' attention with them, and then you go up, and I give them to the parent, say, these are for the kids, but they need to come from you, not from me. And you look around, and it changes everyone who sees it happen. Changes everyone. What I've discovered, I was told a long time ago, whatever I'd like for myself, I should give to everybody else. And I want to be joyful. So I try to spread joy. And I do it with bubbles. And what I've discovered is if I'm sloshing joy all over you, it splatters onto me every time. It can't be blocked. It's not even possible. And I give them, we stopped at the health food store this morning, and when I got my breakfast, I said, thanks for making my bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit. And the lady was really nice, and I said, you win bubbles. And I blew some, because some people don't know what these are, so what it is, and said, here, you win bubbles. And you got to see her face, you know. I buy these things 50 at a time. That's not the truth. I clean the shelf off. I buy 3 or 4 packs of 50 whenever I get them, because I don't ever want to run out of them. The other thing, and this is a gift from Miss Linda, I passed on to actually one of John's sponsees he is in a town that has a lot of traffic jams. And when he gets stuck in a traffic jam, he just gets mad. And I said, I want you to start carrying clown nose. And when you get in a traffic jam, you put on the clown nose and start getting the attention of the people around you. And what will happen is it'll lift their day. When it lifts theirs, it'll lift yours. And then I want you, if you come to a complete stop, and it looks like you're going to stay stopped, put it in park and get out and start passing out clown noses. Come here. And so I want to challenge you to, here, we're not going to run out. I want everybody needs a clown nose. Yeah, there you go. Everybody needs clown noses. And I don't know if you guys do traffic jams up here or not, but if you do, instead of having road rage, have clown nose.
Give Tony 2.
Okay? And I buy these from Amazon in a bag of 50 for practically nothing. And I have had more fun with these things. So when the traffic slows down, the first thing you do is drop your window and start blowing the bubbles out. And if you come to a stop, you put on the clown nose. My nose is too big. There you go. It was funny, Miss Linda spoke in Chicago a couple of weekends ago, and they asked her to send a picture of her so they could pick her out in the airport, and she took one with a clown nose on. Anyway, I wanted to share those things with you before we started into the amends so we could put some energy in the room. It's not easy right after lunch, so thank you for coming back. We're glad to have you. Go for it.
That's all you got? John, alcoholic. I know I said that to me the fourth and fifth step is one of the most important things that we do, and I think 8 and 9 are the most important thing that we do. And the next step, I'm going to tell you that 10 and 11 is probably the most important thing that we do. I see more, this is my amateur sponsor observation, I see more guys go back to drinking from not doing amends than I do from not doing a fourth and fifth step. Like I said, when I got sober, it seemed like there was this kind of just fear about the fourth and fifth step. That seems to have lessened, at least, by my observations. People are more excited to, this day of social media and Facebook and InstaSpace and all this stuff, really interested in writing, a book about themselves, and we're such a self-absorbed society with social media. 4 and 5 doesn't seem to be as difficult to get guys to do as it was, 30 years ago. But making these amends is certainly difficult for all of us. For me, the biggest obstacle to these amends is the how. We talked about that earlier, right? I owe this guy $500,000. How am I going to come up with it, right? How are they going to let me? They're never going to let me back at the Thanksgiving Day table. Whatever I did, fill in the blank. The 8th and 9th step, if you're new here today or haven't gotten this far, the 9th step is Alcoholics Anonymous payday. Without question, that's been my experience. This is where we start to get, for me, some of the relief from these things that are haunting us, right? Like just making the 3rd step, we make the surrender, and that surrender in and of itself doesn't bring any growth, right? That happens when we get into 4 and 5. And this new surrender we've made in 6 and 7, in and of itself, if we just stop there, is not very good. But then when we go into 8 and 9 and start clearing up the wreckage of our past is how we overcome these, not overcome, but these character defects stop running our life as much as they were. My experience is that, we don't learn to master these character defects. We outgrow the need for them, right?
Wow.
I make things right in my life, and I don't need these secret weapons anymore. They're still there, and there's still times where I go in and grab them. The old, I don't know who told this story first. Everyone has stolen it from somebody else, but the story goes, the sponsee says to the sponsor, look, I'm not really sure about making these amends. I don't want to give all these people my money. The sponsor goes, man, don't worry about that. You don't have to give them your money. He goes, thank God, I was worried to death. Because you have to give them their money back, right? And that's the reality. I'll tell you, one of my biggest mistakes in recovery is about an amends. I for the first, God, I hate it when I say this out loud. For the first 8, 9, 10 years of my sobriety, I allowed myself to to think I had made in a living amends. My biggest amends was to my father. I stole thousands and thousands of dollars from my father, and back when, and I stole a year's worth of mortgage payments from my father, and had justified it completely in my head, and had no qualms about it. That's how dark spiritually I was before I got here. So early in sobriety, as I started going through the steps, my sponsor after sponsor after sponsor said, we got to do this. And I'll tell you, I made the easy amends. I made the amends that I knew were going to get me what I wanted, right? I can make these amends on my credit report that are keeping me from getting a mortgage. I can make these amends that will help me, get back in my mom's good favor, because you always, you need your mom, right? You never know when you need to borrow some money or whatever it may be. The easy amends, but I would not address this amends with my father. I mean, when I tell you that I hated my father, I can't express how deep that was. I mean, it ran my life. In that reading that Scott did on 551 and 552 that she described, she said, I fanned it and what's the word she used? I fanned it and feathered it. Nurtured it. I mean, it was every excuse of my life went back to this resentment. And when I got sober, it was just, my family was just glad that I was, not doing the things that I was doing, and he got really sick, and I said, you got to kind of, make things so that they're at least tolerable when you come by the house or come by for Thanksgiving, and so I would start to do little things. They'd ask me to mow the lawn and stuff like that, and so I would just do these little things that I thought was making up for my errors, and I fell right into that trap that the big book talks about, that, we're not concerned with what they did. This is about what we did, And in hindsight, I just knew deep down in my core, I talked about this yesterday, right? When I think I know something, I'm in big trouble. I just knew if I made these amends for what I did, that it would completely negate what he had done to us and to our family, And that's, of course, that's not what this is about. This is about getting our side of the street clean. And I accepted that lie that I was doing living amends. I just I paid the money back, and I to my mother I paid the money back, but I never addressed to him. At 13 years old, when they found out that money I had stolen, my father said to me, "You're dead to me." He said, "I know I have to feed you and I have to clothe you. That's the law for the rest of until you're 18 years old. But the day you're 18, you're out." And I gave him the double middle fingers, and I said, "You've been dead to me a long time." And that's the way it went for the next, many, many years. But as I got sober, and my mom would make me come by the house and stuff, it was fine. It was fine enough that that they could tolerate. But so I tell you that to say that I think we have to be careful when we're talking about living amends. Now, sometimes there is a living amend to be done. When we make this direct amend, your mother might say, "Well, this is the amends I want you to make is to come by every week and have dinner with me." Well, that great. That's a living amends. But for me, I think we have to, as the book says, we have to directly make, we have to be able to sit down and directly talk about what we did. And that was what never happened with my father. My father died when I had 9 years of sobriety, and my sponsor at the time said, "Listen, you need to go make this amends. You're going to regret the rest of your life if you don't." He's getting ready to die, and, I wouldn't do it. Wouldn't, couldn't, whatever it was, I didn't do it. And, we're going to get into the graveside amends process, and my experience is that any situation, any wrong that we've done, we can find peace for. But when it comes to this 8-step list, at the end of the 6 and 7 step reading, it says that we've got this list from our 4-step. My experience is that that's an incomplete list. It's a good starting point. There are many people that I owe amends to that are not on my resentment list, and they're not on my sex inventory. And so I have to, start from scratch, but I can use that. And there's, 4 or 5 different types of harms, right? Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual harms, financial harms. I thought just because, and then the thing that I found, especially with family members, was, what I wanted to make amends for was not how they thought I had hurt them. And so when I get a guy, and whoever it is that I'm taking through the steps, I ask them to write down every amends that they need to make, and we go over this list. And sometimes we cross some off, and sometimes we add some, because I know his inventory now. And we
if he can't tell me how he harmed this person, he doesn't owe them an amend. It's
Yeah.
really important stuff. I've been at these microphones for 25 years, and I've had the experience on more than one occasion. A guy walk up to me at a conference, a guy I've never seen before, say, "Oh, you own a man." I say, "What for?" And he would say words to the effect of, "Well, I used to think you were a total jerk, but now that I met you, I don't think you're near as bad as a jerk as I thought you were." That's what I hear him say. And that's not an amend. So now when I do that, I say, "Tell me how you harmed me." "I didn't harm you." "Then you don't owe me an amend." "Nice to meet you. I'm gone." So if a sponsee can't tell me how he harmed them, he doesn't owe them an amend. And hating them and judging them does not harm them, it harms me. Thank you.
I think all good amends have three qualities. One is accountability. I'm willing to sit down and say, "Listen, this is what I did wrong. You know, I'm not using my alcoholism as an excuse." You know, I sit down with someone, I say, "Listen, you know, as part of our program, we try to make things right that we've done, and I know that I've harmed you in this way." Accountability. The second part is willingness to set it straight. You know, I'm within reason. Bill says we don't become doormats. You know, I'm not going to repay you $10,000 for a $1,000 loan, right? I mean, we're allowed to negotiate with our creditors, as Bill says. And the third part isn't really in the book, but it's my willingness to hear something different. Because I've got this opportunity, and mainly with family members, not so much with some in business, but even sometimes then, I've got this ability here, this opportunity here, I should say, to set them free. A lot of times they're not in the program or in a fellowship, don't have a spiritual set of solutions, and they're holding on to something for a long time. I'll give you a little example. You know, when I went to go make amends to my mother, it was about the stuff that I felt bad about, the money and stuff like that, and you know, my anger and stuff like that. And that's not what she was most hurt by. She was hurt by the weekends not showing up, thinking that I'm dead in the gutter. You know, I mean, I was a complete terrorist in my house. I mean, I terrorized my family. You know, I remember walking down the stairs and my mom was talking to some Al-Anon, and she said, "You know, he's just not going to live to be 18 years old." You know, now that I've had kids that are, you know, that age, I can't imagine my kids doing to me what I did to her. You look like you were chomping at the bit. You know, and I want to share with you a couple of amends that I've had experiences with recently, you know, because you know, as we go through this, they come up, you know, and our perspective changes. When I was talking about my second surrender yesterday, I'd convinced, this is going to be a little bit long story, but you have to bear with me, because this is an illustration that, you know, in this, what I call Alcoholics Anonymous payday, you know, spiritual math is different than our worldly math, right? 2 + 2 does not equal 4. I love what Bob Darrell talks about, that, you know, we can divide our amends into 4 columns, and I'm probably going to butcher this, but there's those that I'm willing and able to do. There's those that I'm willing to do in the next column. There's those that I'm able to do, but I'm not willing, and then there's those that I'm not willing and I'm not able. And if we can just focus on the ones that I'm willing and able to do, God will rearrange the universe to make it possible. Something like that, and that's been my experience. So when my life came crashing down, I'd connived this guy, which is a soft way of saying, you know, I manipulated him to selling me this business, and I owed him a lot of money. It was, you know, to buy the business was about $500,000, and to secure the business, he put a lien on my home, and in short order, in 2 years flat, the business was history. He had to repossess it and try to make it work, and there was no making it work, but so at the end of the day, I owed him a bunch of money. It wasn't quite that much amount of money, but it was, you know, a lot of money. And so for a couple of years, I really didn't address it, because I was, you know, like I said, I went from making a whole lot of money to a whole little money, and I'm not even feeding my kids. I'm not even paying my mortgage payment during the mortgage crisis. Went 2.5 years without making a mortgage payment. And you know, we were trying to work with, you know, the mortgage companies to make that work, and you know, never really could. And so after a period of time, I started getting on my feet again, and I was able to convince this mortgage company to refi the house, because when I defaulted on the loan, the interest rate went from like 4 to like 9, you know, and the mortgage payment became completely you know, nobody could make the payment. Well, maybe a couple guys we know could, but I couldn't make the payment. And so I convinced this mortgage company to refi the loan. They're like, "Well, you got this lien on the home. That's a problem. You know, you owe this guy $460,000, but we can cash out. We can get him X amount of dollars. It was $50,000 cash out for him if he'll take the lien off." And so I called him with really good news, because I haven't given him a penny in 3 or 4 years now. And I've filed bankruptcy, so he can't garnish my wages. And so I think I'm arriving with good news. I say, hey, Roscoe, I got really good news. If you'll sign this paperwork to release the lien off my home, and he was in the program, you'll get $50,000 right away, and I'll sign a new lien for an amount that we agree on. And he said, John, it just sounds too easy for you. I'm not doing it. And I hung up and I kind of shrugged my shoulders and I said, well, I've done the best I can. I called Scott and I convinced him, right, that this guy was an idiot. Cherry picked the data, right? Don't give him the whole story. And I really believe I've done what I can. This is his problem. I'm saying to myself, man, I've never had a $50,000 resentment. This poor guy. I'll pray for him. I did. I prayed for him, and kind of came back to haunt me. And I don't know, about a year later, I didn't do anything with this. A year later, I'm sitting in my home group, and some young kid was talking about the 8th and 9th step and just takes my inventory upside down. I feel like I'm buck naked in front of the group. You ever had that? Like someone just takes your inventory in a meeting? Because I'll never go to say, he says, my job is just to be willing. If I can't handle amends, I just, I do what I can when I can. Just to be willing. I don't remember what the exact words were, but it really haunted me. And so the next day, I knew exactly what I had to do. I didn't have to go home and call my sponsor. The next day, I mailed this guy a letter. It was $500. I sent him a check for $500. I said, man, listen, in the letter, I said, this is way too little, and this is way too late, but God willing, I'll be able to send you more. And I sent him a little more, a little more, a little more. And business started picking up, and I was, a little more, and things going on. I was doing pretty good. And he sent me this text out of the blue. He said, hey, listen, if you can come up with $20,000, I'll take the lien off your house. I don't have $20,000 at this time. 3 kids just in college. All 3 kids are in college. I'm barely feeding myself. And but I've been in printing sales my entire life. That month, I had the most incredible month of sales I've ever had. Never happened before, and it hasn't happened since. Guess how much extra money I made that month? $20,000. Not like a little bit less, a little more. Exactly that amount of money. And I wish I could tell you that when I was, in the process, when you're halfway through the month, you realize, man, I'm having a really good sales month. This is going to be a big check. I wish I could tell you when I realized that my first thought was to make this amends. That was not my first thought. I literally thought, man, are we going to go to Hawaii for Christmas, or am I going to buy a Rolex? Right? And the cool part about that story is that, we met at the lawyer's office. I gave him the money, and he told me that he loved me, and that he respected me, and he'd go into business with me again. And what was, for me, the growth in that amends was that I knew that wasn't enough that I owed him. I owed him a lot more than that. And we agreed to a number, and still making payments on that number. Because I was going through the steps from scratch then, and I just knew that wasn't the right number, because it wasn't right. And he still today, texts me all the time, tells me how much he loves me, and asks me how my business is going. And so my job is just to be willing in this process. I can't get caught up on the how. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks. It's beautiful. Well done. Thank you, John. One of the things I asked Don Pritz on 2 different occasions, about 3 years apart, what's a sponsor's primary responsibility? And the first time he said it was to maintain the integrity of the message. The second time he said it was to not allow the sponsee to settle for relief, but get him all the way to recovery. By the time I get him to step 9, he's got a job, he's been promoted at work, he knows where all the dents in his car came from, he brings the entire paycheck home, his key fits in the front door, that's a miracle. He walks in, they don't scatter, it's another miracle. The phone rings, that's a miracle. He answers, that's a miracle. He's sleeping in the big bed again. His motivation has waned, and my job is to keep him moving. And one of the things I like to do is I like to get him sponsoring when he gets to step 8. And they almost always say the same thing, I'm not ready. I say, good, I hope you don't ever think you're ready. I hope I never think I'm ready. And what we're going to do is we're going to find you a rookie, and you're going to get that rookie's permission, blanket permission, to talk to me in detail about his life. And I'm going to coach you through coaching him through these steps. And we'll do that as many times as necessary. And two things happen there. One is he's got a message by now. He's got a lot to give a rookie. The second piece is he doesn't want his rookie to get to 8 before he finishes 9. And it helps me keep him moving. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I go through that. And I agree with John said, the only thing necessary to make amends is the willingness to do so. And a way will be shown. I have the privilege of sponsoring a fellow from Kiev, Ukraine. And we've got more 20-year-plus people sober in my home group on Sunday morning. They have in the entire Soviet bloc. So they don't have the wealth of experience laying around that we do. And he used to call me twice a week, say, I sponsor this guy that sponsors this guy who did the following, what's his amend? And I always said the same thing. The sponsor and sponsee need to sit prayerfully several times, and the way will be shown. And if it's not, call me back. He don't call. He don't call. A way will be shown. That's what happens. Don't ever doubt the power. And I hear people say my amends to my children will never be complete, and that's not true. That is not true. I had a formal amends session with both of my children. They know when it happened. I know when it happened. We're complete. The fact that I'm trying to be the best father I can be today is not 9th step work, it's 12th. It's the principles in all our affairs. Spiritually awakened men who have children try to be good fathers. And if I think it's 9th step work, I've not accepted their forgiveness or God's or my own, and I have work to do. And I hear people talking about continuing to, that scares me. Because that's coming from a position of guilt, and it's not necessary. That's just for me. Whatever you're doing is really okay with me. I talked about it a little bit as if you've done this and you're okay with it, I'm okay with it. I'm not here to indict you. It's simply my story. I paid for an abortion as a young man, and I get to the amends process, and I owe amends to an unborn child, and I didn't think it could be done. Don't doubt the power here. This is page 83. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter. I was shown how to write that letter. And as we observed this morning, although there's writing involved in the 4th step, it is not the writing that is life-changing. It is the observations and prayers. My experience with this letter is that it was not the writing that cleansed my spirit. It was the tears. And I offered before, I told you I've been taught to cry. My experience has been it is the crying portion of that amend that is the cleansing. And I've worked with a lot of people. If you've got an amend to make to a grandparent, somebody who's already on the other side, my experience on how I write that letter is here on the other side of this thing about how to learn to cry. And it was really important for me to do that. And I got free. I mean, my demeanor doesn't change as I tell you about it. Just one more fact. Just one more fact. I also hated the football coach. I mean, just one more fact. I also like to tell my sponsee that we're not going to turn your will and life over to the care of someone who may be in love with hating you. The person you owe the amends to is not final authority on what the amend is. You and I are prayerfully. If you'd gone to Big Ken Sweeney before he got sober to make an amend, he would have bashed you for the rest. I used to sponsor him, and this is his story. I would have bashed you for the rest of your life because he was that kind of guy before he got to us. So you don't have to turn. We need to know what they think the amend is, but they don't get to be final authority on it. They don't. So, and I think that helps a lot to know that. It helps a lot to know what the amend is. So I like to take the first, 15 or 20, or whatever is on the list, and let's talk very specifically. Let's talk about what this amend would be. So he has an idea. Now, I have my own, these are techniques that I've found to work for me. I don't let the guys I sponsor use the word, I was sorry. No one believes that anymore. We wore that out decades ago. I was wrong, or I believe I've harmed you. Pretty good choices. Your mother does not need to hear your 5th step. Here's amends to my mother. I wasn't as good a son to you as I could have been, and I know you broke your heart. I broke your heart a couple of times. I'm living a different life now, and part of that is to try to repair the damage I've done. Can you tell me how I can do that? Do you need to tell me how I hurt you? That's enough. I tell you, if you take the 4th breath when you're making amends, you've already said too much. You keep talking, you're going to throw in an excuse for yourself and take away all the power for them. Really important not to do that, I think. The other thing is I like to apply the one day, the guy's looking, he says, I got 60 amends, and his mind is saying you can't make 60 amends, and he can't. We can make one tomorrow. So which one do you want to do first? Well, let's put the mother-in-law on the little bit later on. But which one do you want to do first? Okay, that's a good choice. When can you call them to schedule the appointment? Why can't you call them now? Good, make it as soon as possible. Oh, good, tomorrow afternoon at 2. Great, I'll be looking for your call at 2:15. How did it go? They didn't even remember? No problem. Who's next on the list? When can you call them? Why can't you call them now? Make an appointment. We're 60 days from finishing. It's not that hard. This is one John and I learned in Calgary. We had the privilege a couple of years ago of doing this kind of thing for a weekend. And one of the most difficult ones, and I've wrestled with it for years, and I'm doing this the best I can.
You've got a good memory for an old man.
It's intermittent.
It's good.
It's intermittent. There are holes.
I'd forgotten that.
But it's I sponsor guys. How does a guy make amends to a lady whose charms he's availed himself of lightly without making her feel cheap? It's a pretty good question. The first piece is you get a woman from your home group to make the initial contact. You don't want her to have to answer to her new husband, who was that guy on the phone. So let's don't do any damage that way. She calls up and says, I have a friend, his name, he's now in AA, he believes he's harmed you, he'd like to make amends, are you willing for him too? If the answer is no, we're done here. If the answer is yes, then let's figure out, does it need to be a letter, does it need to be an email, do they meet in person, in which case I need to be there? Let's find out what it is. And then these are the words. Wow. I wasn't as good a friend to you as I could have been, and I disrespected you. And I believe I've done some harm. And I'd like to repair that damage. Can you tell me how? That's plenty. If someone has a suggestion to add to that, we really want to hear it. Because John and I searched a long time, and there were some ladies in Calgary that gave that to us, and I received it as a gift. Because we deal with this one all the time. All the time. Let's don't do any more damage while we're trying to make these amends. Many amends turned into 12-step calls. I think it's really important for me to tell somebody I'm now in an AA, I'm now in a 12-step program. Because a lot of them will turn into 12-step calls. The other thing I do is when I'm on the way to a conference, when somebody's sitting next to me on the airline says, why are you going to Portland, Oregon? I tell them. And boy, those turned into 12-step calls about half of the time. I was going to Orlando one time and somebody asked me, and a couple in the seats in front of me got up on their knees and turned around in the seat and said, we got to talk to you about our daughter. And I mean, I can't hide this. And I'm not embarrassed. And anonymity is something I don't think we understand very well. I give my last name in AA meetings in keeping with our tradition of anonymity. If that didn't make any sense to you, I'd like to recommend the book Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers. Really important. We're anonymous at the public level. In here, we need to be able to find each other. Remember, your home group goes into the hospital. You walk up to the reception desk and says, pardon me, ma'am, can you tell me what room Chainsaw Mike is in? Well, they don't know. They don't know. So we need to be able to find each other. But anonymity is doing something good for somebody else not getting caught. I want to share a gift from my beloved with you. She calls this process good amends. And I'm aware of my sins of commission, the things I did that I think harmed people. What I'm not aware of is my sins of omission. What did I leave out that they deserved? And the answer is thank you, and lots of it. And so I went to the first instructor pilot I had when I was still a civilian. And he was a retired Air Force colonel, and he saw that I had a gift. Because I could have coasted, and he wouldn't let me. Nothing I ever did was good enough for him. He set up my Air Force career. I was at the top of everything I did flying because of what he did for me. I was able to go back and thank him for that. I went and thanked my major professor in college. I'd have never graduated without that man. I was able to go thank him. And I went and made amends to my mother for not being a good son. And at a separate time, a long time later, I went to her and I thanked her for being a great mom. And I thanked her for her sacrifice, and I talked about that. And I talked about all I learned and all her love. And then I went home and I wrote her a letter, longhand, about what a great mom she was, and just thanked her. My mother died at a nursing home with Alzheimer's, and she didn't have much at the end. She had that letter. To whom do you owe amends? To whom do you owe good amends? Who deserve to be thanked more than you thank them? What a phenomenal experience. But if you also owe them the regular kind of amends, I recommend you just separate them by several months. Don't do those on top of each other. It'll have more power. Go ahead.
Thank you, Scott. You know, I like what Scott talked about, taking this piecemeal. You know, we have 60 amends, and I like to ask my guys to write them on 3x5 cards. And I said, let's just tackle 3. I say, what are the 3 things that keep you staring at the ceiling at night? And we tackle those right away. And I asked him to call me beforehand, before he goes in to make this amends. We say a prayer together. Call me when you get out. I've never seen God not show up. I love hearing Scott talk about, God's old bank shots happen in these things.
Yeah.
You know, going back to a high school and making an amends, and he's saying, oh, this is, again, the how gets in the way. Oh, I'm not gonna be able to make this right. This guy, the principal's long gone or whatever it is. And they say, well, can you speak to our assembly? If we bring in 1,000 kids, can you sit in here and tell them your story? You never know how God's going to use you. Our job is to stop squeezing the umbilical cord, and this is one of those ways.
I want to share a couple of other experiences. I really needed that cry, but I want to share a couple of experiences on amends before we move on to 10. A fellow and I have permission to tell the stories I tell, by the way, without exception. On the schoolyard in about the 3rd grade, he grabs another kid's hat and hides it behind his hat, and just boom, the hat's gone. Nobody knows who got it. When no one's looking, he flings it up in a tree and it hides, and it's gone, and he never comes clean on that. That kid's from a poor family and goes through that winter without a hat. And here we are 30 years later. He doesn't know the kid's name. The school is no longer there. Clearly, there's no way he can make amends here. Don't believe it. Don't you ever doubt the power. And he and I sit prayerfully, and the next day, all the kids at the orphanage get a Tennessee Titans stocking cap. In my sponsee gets free. Don't doubt the power here. A way will be shown. A business associate of mine I've known off and on in my industry for years came to me one day and he said, I have watched what these 12 steps have done to your life. Can I take the 12 steps? And I said, are you an alcoholic? And he said, no. I said, I don't think you are either. If you had that gift, I would have seen it by now. He just doesn't have the gift. But I said, having me for a friend qualifies you for Al-Anon. And if you will go to 2 Al-Anon meetings a week and not drink a glass of wine with your steak or have a joint on the way to bed with your girlfriend, because I want you totally present, I'll take you through these steps as an Al-Anon. He said, great, it was no problem for him. He just doesn't do that stuff. Anyway, there's no explanation for that. And we get to step 9, and he makes amends to a young lady whose charms he availed himself of lightly and discovers a daughter and 2 grandchildren he didn't know existed. And today they're a family. This is important work that we do here. This is important stuff. Out of my own experience, they tell me if I want to strengthen a muscle, I should use it. And I claim I want more faith. Welcome to step 9. I got to be really careful. A guy that I know in business was a Green Beret. He was on the ground in Laos for a couple of years. When he got there, the hill tribesmen were carrying crossbows. He brought them M16s and led them in combat on the ground in northern Laos and North Vietnam when the president said we weren't there. This guy doesn't know how many times he's killed with his hands. He does not know. And he was sleeping with the owner's daughter of that business. And I knew it, and I was drunk one night and said something about it. And they got back to him. And I lied out of it, of course. And I get sober, and I'm going to have to make amends for this. And he comes to Nashville to a trade show at the Opryland Hotel, and I know what I've got to do. And I'm told if you want God to be real in your life, you better treat him like he's real. And so I did that. And I called him and said, he said, oh yeah, I can't wait, come on. And I invited God to go with me. I held the door for him. I went over to the passenger side of the car and opened the door, moved the junk, and asked him to get in. And got to the hotel, parked the car, walked around, opened the passenger door, asked him to come with me. And I can remember standing outside that door. I swear I think I could find that door. Like this, knowing that this man decides to kill me in the next couple of minutes, I can't even slow him down. And I was able, because of what you had done with me, to go in there and make that amend. And a couple of months later, my beloved and I were guests in his home for a week. Don't doubt the power here. Wall Street Dan, our buddy who was the vice president on Wall Street, in Black Tuesday in '87, he lost $10 million that day. Look up bad day in your dictionary. That's Dan's picture. And I had been sponsoring him for a little while. He had been living in a borrowed car. It was convertible. The roof leaked. He'd been living in it and just gotten enough together to get an apartment. And I love the way he tells the story. His answering machine, one day, he pushes the play button and it says, "This is Agent Smith with the Internal Revenue Service. You have an appointment in my office Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock at 1010 Church Street. And if that's in conflict with your schedule, I'd like to suggest you change your schedule." And Dan is hit with a bill for $167,000. He's been living in a borrowed car. He's a little bit short on $167,000. And he said, "What should I do?" And I said, "You want God to be real in your life? Treat him like he's real. That's all I got for you." And so he did that. And they had asked for a bunch of records. He got everything together, and he described, as I did, inviting God, holding the door, and all of that. He said when they walked into the agent's office, there were 2 chairs on his side of the desk. And they knew he was going to win. And about 6 months later, when that was over, they wrote him a check for $1,200. Don't doubt the power here. Don't doubt the power. Get Danny Brown. Lee's got one of my favorite talks of Danny's. You want to hear somebody talk about making amends? Listen to Danny Brown. Listen to Chainsaw Mike. Phenomenal experiences. I'll tell one more and then we're going to move on. I wish I could remember who this was. I heard this on the CDs. I feel pretty good about telling it. This guy used to break into houses and steal stuff. And his sponsor said, "You know where some of them are?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Go knock on the door." So a guy knocks on this door. This lady answers, and he says, "This is my name, and about this date, I broke into your house and stole some stuff. And I'm here to make it right." She said, "Please come in." And she and her husband walked him through the house. "And you stole?" He said, "Yes, there was a painting here. I stole that. And there was this, and I stole that." And she said, "There was a painting here, and it was cut. There was an X cut in it. Why did you do that?" And he said, "I thought there was a safe behind it, and I couldn't get the painting off the wall." She said, "We'll never be able to thank you for coming. Our son hated the person in that painting, and we thought he had done this. We've thrown him out of the family. And we thought he was the one that had done all of that. Your amend is complete." This is important stuff that we're doing here. It's important stuff. You got something else on this, and we move on to 10?
Yeah, if we haven't said enough, I can't say enough that having a sponsor involved in this process is so important, especially when it comes to relationships and infidelities. And I just like to read what the book says, because I think it's pretty clear. If we have another second to spend on
go for it.
On 9, because this is probably the biggest question I get with working with guys is, how do I deal with my infidelities? Do I tell her? Do I not tell her? And I don't think as sponsors we have that answer, and that's the point that I want to make. But at the bottom of 80 it says, "The chances are that we have domestic troubles. Perhaps we're mixed up with women in a fashion we wouldn't care to have advertised." And it goes on to talk about it. And at the bottom of that page it says, "Our design for living is not a one-way street. It is as good for the wife as it is for the husband. If we forget, so can she. It is better, however, that one does not needlessly name a person whom she can vent jealously. Perhaps there are some cases where the utmost frankness is demanded. No outsider," and I think in that situation, a sponsor is an outsider.
Mm-hmm.
"No outsider can appraise such an intimate situation." I think it's really spiritual arrogance to advise a guy on that. I tell him he has to prayerfully figure that out. There's many questions that we don't know the answer to. What's this going to affect, and what's the whole deal? So I know for me in this amends process with my wife and trying to make these things right, we struggled a lot, and that's one of the questions I get the most. I bet there's one in the Ask It basket. How do you guys recover from that in sobriety when that happens, and how do you make those things right? And for me, the toughest thing that I've ever done in sobriety is stay after that happened. Because I was convinced, as I said, I think yesterday, that she was going to beat me with that club for the rest of my life. But really, because my MO in relationships is when I've offended whether it's romantic or not, my MO is once I've hurt somebody and I feel shameful about it, I just cut them out of my life and I move on. Because if I stay and accept their amends, then I've got to be that. Then I'm that person. Then I accept what I've done, and I'm excited to tell you that Alcoholics Anonymous has saved our marriage and built our marriage to a place where I never thought it could be by just doing these steps and trying to practice these principles.
Thanks. Yeah, go on to step 10. Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, probably admitted it. That's how I got here. Anyway, I had to make a few changes in that. I noticed in the reading on step 10 on page 84 that the word continue appears 4 times in the first paragraph. And what it tells me, this is just me, whatever you're doing suits me fine. I distinguish step 10 from step 11. That step 10 is a spot check inventory during the day. It's about staying present in my own life moment by moment. The evening inventory is an 11th step inventory. I hear people talk about their 10th step inventory at night. But if I wait until 11:30 at night to look for the mistake I made at 7:15 in the morning, promptly is already out of the equation. So to me, step 10 is about staying present in my own life, and I think there's a slogan that applies to it. And it's the second hardest of the slogans, which is easy does it. If I'm Mach 2 with my hair on fire, I don't even notice it when I tromp all over your feet. I just don't notice it. So it says this thought suggests we continue to take personal inventory, continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. It's about being present in my own life moment by moment. We vigorously commence this way of living as we clean up the past. We have entered the world of the Spirit. Want to know where we enter the world of the Spirit? The assumption here is that you've done the first 9. Our next function is to go on understanding and effectiveness. I don't think they've asked me to understand anything by this point, because I can't until I get the trash taken out of my soul. Not an overnight matter. Continue for our lifetime. And then here's this piece we looked at before. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. That list looks vaguely familiar. When, not if, these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them, discuss them immediately, and make amends quickly if we've harmed anyone, and then beat ourselves up. No, beating me up is never the next right thing, no matter what I've just done. Once again, the same prescription. Turn my thoughts to someone I can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code. I'm going to tell a story about a guy from my home group, and I'm going to refer to him as Edward, which is the right thing. He said that was his name. But Edward, everything he did bothered me. I did not like the way the man drank his coffee. Everything he did rubbed my fur the wrong way. And I'm sitting there in a meeting hating Edward one time when I hear my sponsor's voice in the back of my mind saying, if you spot it, you got it. And I realized that what Edward's doing is something I do also. I thought, wow. So the next time Edward upset me, I looked, and I was doing that too. Edward became one of my best teachers. He had all of my character defects. He had them a lot worse than I have. No question about that. And I learned so much from him. And what I've discovered is, if I'm having to tolerate someone, they just might have a lesson for me. And if I spot it, I got it. The other piece is that the good news on the spot that you got is you've seen growth in somebody. Congratulations. You spotted it. Maybe you got it too. It says we'll cease fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. And here's where they tell me my sanity will have returned. Seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted to recoil from a hot flame, react sanely and normally, and we find that this has happened automatically, that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. That's easy to take out of context. If you've done what we've talked about this far, you've made tremendous effort. It has not been focused on your attitude toward booze. That's the point we're making here. All right. We're not focused on the problem at all. The problem bores me to death. We're focused on the solution. And it says at the end of that paragraph, is how we react as long as we keep in a fit spiritual condition. It's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. Well, if it's easy to let up, it must require effort to not let up. Then I think it does. And rest on our laurels. Laurels is a reference to ancient either Greece or Rome, and I don't remember which, where when the athlete would win the discus or the 100 meters or whatever it was, laurel is a vine, and they would weave it into a wreath, and he'd wear it on his head like one of our athletes would get a gold medal as a badge of his victory. So if you're resting, and it was worn on the head, so if you're resting on your laurels, guess where your head is? That was a good guess. All right, we're headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We're not cured. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. My daily reprieve is not contingent on my spiritual condition, but on the maintenance of it. I talked about what maintenance means to me before. It says, every day is the day we must carry the vision of God's will in all of our activities. There it is. That's the entire thing. Every day I get no days off. Carry the vision, the best I can see, of God's will, what we'd have me do next in all of our activities. I missed something on page 77 and it just came zipping back for me. I've only got 2 brain cells left. One of them's on the respirator and the other one flickers. And this one just flickered.
I sent that to you, through our brains, because I was just thinking about that.
Sure you did.
I did.
Yeah, you did. Good. Third line, our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. Clearly, it's not my job to be of maximum service, but to fit myself to be of maximum service. I don't know what maximum service is. How would I know that? How would I do it? I have no idea. Fit myself to be? I know how to do that. Same old answer. Daily prayer and meditation, reading spiritual literature, taking meetings into jails and treatment centers, saying please and thank you, letting people in and just doing these things that we do. I misread that for the longest time. Every once in a while, something new just screams at me. So back on 85, every day is the day we must carry the vision of God's will in all of our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. There's the second of 2 10-step prayers. And then further down, about 6 lines from the bottom, to some extent we've become God conscious. We've begun to develop this vital sixth sense. And I had 10 years when my sponsee had 6 months, and he said to me, I guess if I'm still using my other 5 senses to get my will, I might not develop this vital sixth sense. And I said, would you sponsor me? Isn't that a beautiful thing, though? What a beautiful thing. You got something else on 10? We'll go to break.
No, I hear often that these last 3 steps are the maintenance steps, and I could not disagree more.
No.
These are the growth steps. 1 through 9 is about cleaning up the message and stop squeezing that umbilical cord and being able to be a better instrument. Somebody told me once that 10 is about staying right with me, and 11 is about staying right with God, and 12 is about staying right with my fellows. I really love that. I think this is where the growth happens. I mean, if you're not working with a new guy and not growing, man, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong.
I got one more little piece on this. This is just what I do. Because I hear people referring to what step I'm 10, 11, and 12. To run them together, I don't like that. When I get somebody's amends as complete as we can get them, I ask him to take a 2-week focus on step 10. I want him to read the step in the big book once a day for a couple of weeks. If you chair a meeting, discussion meeting, the topic is step 10. If you're at a meeting that calls for a topic from the floor, the topic is step 10. Don't do it twice at the same meeting, but let's get into the focus. I want him to pick out 5 men whose programs he respects greatly and ask them to take a few minutes and talk to him about step 10. And let's put a heavy 2-week focus on step 10. At the end of those 2 weeks, I sit down with him and review step 10 as I understand it and give him the same assignment on 11, and eventually I'll give him the same assignment on 12. Let's don't run them together. Shall we take a break?
We're over. Yep.
Y'all ready? Yeah, we've run over. So it's going to be a short break, so smoke them really hard.